Let's do it.
This is the SEC Insider Hit. And it's presented by Blue Cross Blue Shield of Mississippi. It's good to be blue.
This segment's brought to you by Sound and Communications, soundcomav.com. Installing sound systems, football fields, arenas. Oh, man. Lighting for performance art centers, powered by soundcomav.com. Sound and Communications. That's right, sound systems for football stadiums, baseball fields, arenas, gymnasiums, you name it, all powered by soundcomav.com, Sound and Communications. We welcome in our friend Mike Detillier, LSU Insider, WWL Radio TV New Orleans. Here we go, 11 a.m. game, LSU, Mississippi State. I'll be there. Many of you listening will be there. It's our Tito's Vodka Bloody Mary game of the week with that 11 a.m. kickoff, and two teams still trying to kind of figure out who they are. Mike, what are you looking for the first quarter? You know, the first part of the game as far as LSU and Mississippi State in this matchup this weekend?
Well, LSU's secondary can't get too much worse. I mean, they really got torched in the first quarter against Grambling, where they got picked apart in the secondary. But I think they found them a corner in Denver Harris, the former Texas A&M transfer. I thought he got beat against Grambling, but he's talented, and he's got all the skills that you're looking for. It's his focus and his total dedication to the game that has been in question here. But I think they've got one there, and he is really talented. How well that secondary will play, I think, is important because I think they have found them the running back combination that they've looked for. And Logan Diggs, who played high school football at Archbishop Rummel and was at Notre Dame. I thought he had a really, really big effort against Grambling. And the freshman, Caleb Jackson, who I've been waiting to watch in the lineup. I think Caleb's a guy, and this is nothing against Josh Williams, Noah Kane, John Emery, who returns also this week to play against Mississippi State. But I think their best 1-2 punch is Logan Diggs and Caleb Jackson in the backfield. They got better up front, and some of that certainly has to do with the emergence of Zaylen Hurd at the right tackle position. And I think you're going to see him eventually earn himself a spot at right tackle, and they're going to kick Emory Jones inside to a right guard. LSU's offense is not the concern for me at all. It's on defense, and it's the coverage part in the secondary. And you saw them use you saw them use Perkins a little bit differently against Grambling than they did against Florida State. He was more out on the edge than he was inside. And I want to watch how that emerges with House's defense, because that didn't seem to be a good fit for Perkins at all to be inside. He seemingly got lost in a lot of heavy traffic. Being out on the edge, he was given a lot more room to run, and you saw his playmaking skills.
Mike Detillier, LSU Insider on the Farm Bureau Insurance guest line. Mike, the line's moving a little bit, but it's 9.5, 10 points. You think that's where it should be, LSU?
Yeah, I would have said 9 right off the bat. And so I could see that 9.5, 10 points, somewhere in that range. LSU's, man, they got talent, and especially on the offensive side of football. And their front seven defensively, I think, is pretty good. I think the big question mark is how well they can match up in the secondary. We see a little bit more balanced Mississippi State team than maybe we've seen in years past. They don't throw the football nearly as much, and it's much more them trying to establish a running game with that. And it's not that Coach Leach didn't try to do it; he just didn't want to do it. His deal is, I don't need to do that. I'm just going to throw the football, and every once in a while, I'll give you a shot with the running game. But I think LSU's front seven is pretty doggone good, and I think we'll get better. I do think one of the things with the limited practice sessions, and I mean, come on, there's no preseason in college football, that the units that get the better as the season goes along are offensive line play and defensive line play. You cannot practice the physicality part of a real game today. And I get the part where you want to be protective of players and you're trying to keep everybody healthy. But without doing that in practice, it takes away a bit of the physicality part that is always going to be part of college, pro football, high school football. Until you play it, it's not going to be there in any type of scrimmage or walk-through practices or whatever they do today. It's different from even 5 years ago in how they practice and how they do things. So I think the early games, you get better as you play up front along the lines. And we can talk about all the toys. Okay, wide receivers, tight ends, running backs, DBs. You got to have a big-time quarterback to win. And also you got to win up front. Without those two elements, you're not going anywhere.
Woo! Okay, so you feel like you're pretty comfortable in that LSU by 2 possessions space.
I would think 9 to 10 points, somewhere in that range, I think is where it will fall. These games, though, I've got to admit, have been really strange, the Mississippi State LSU games. We've seen games where, LSU has jumped ahead, and then Mississippi State fights back and it becomes a close game. And we've seen it vice versa, the exact opposite. So that element over the last 20, 25 years has been in place. LSU has won the vast majority of those games. But, Bo, there have been some really strange games in this series. Really has. And, I just remember a few years back after the national championship game, and LSU was pumped to beat the band that, this is going to be easy. We'll get right back to that. And, man, Leach and company, they pushed them right between the eyes.
Yeah.
And they drilled them that game, passing the football. So where I think LSU is, and I really believe this, is the better team personnel-wise, and probably that 9 to 10 points is in that range. This game has always taken some twists and turns to it. And I think history does have a tendency to repeat itself.
Size up that LSU defensive front for me.
Well, we got to see Mason Smith for the first time, and there was a little bit of football rust with him, but there aren't a lot of 6'5", 300 guys that can run like he can. And he gives them a physical presence that's not only tough against the run, but he's also can give you some pass rush skills. But the real star up front early on has been Mekhi Wingo. Here was a guy that was a freshman all-SEC player at Missouri, transfers in, and he sort of built along the lines of what we've seen in the past from LSU, from a Booger McFarland or a Marlon Favorite. A guy that's more likely under 6 foot tall. He's in that 300, 310-pound range. The first half against Florida State, he spent more time in the backfield than Trey Benson, the running back for Florida State. He was in there every play. Now, again, there was some wear down with him, and they started to double-team him. But he's the unsung hero, was last year and is again, I think, this year, an unsung hero for LSU up front. And then Savion Jones, where Mason grew up probably 10 to 15 minutes away from me, Savion's probably 20. He went to St. James High School. When I first saw him, the first thing that came to mind to me was I didn't watch Daniil Hunter play high school football in Texas before he went to LSU. But that's who Daniil Hunter reminds me of. It would be Savion. And I think he's got some real skill set as a defensive end to be a force there. And I think that threesome is going to be really good for LSU up front. And they have some depth where they went out in the transfer portal to get a Jordan Jefferson. They trying to get some playing time to, I think, maybe the most physically gifted of the defensive linemen at LSU, Quincy Wiggins, some playing time. Now, Quincy only played 2 years of high school football. He really was a basketball player, track athlete. But he's 6'6", 285 pounds today, and just learning the game. So LSU got dudes up front, so to speak. That's a Drew Brees line because he told me that LSU got dudes. But they have more talent and depth this year than they did a year ago up front. And
wow.
I think that linebacking core is pretty doggone good. When you look at Perkins, bringing in Omar Speights, who was an all Pac-12 linebacker last year at Oregon State, and Greg Penn III. I think of all the guys in their front seven, he gets the least recognition. And this had to be a little over a month ago. We did the final camp here on the Bayou. And I talked to both Mason Smith and Savion, along with Will Campbell, the offensive tackle. And I asked them who was the one guy people aren't talking about, but is a difference maker. All three of them gave me the same answer, and yet weren't all in the same room at the same time. Greg Penn.
Wow.
And so that was unique because normally, you get kind of different answers. And Mason gave me a couple of players, but he said Penn first. Will Campbell right off the bat said Greg Penn. And Savion was kind of echoed the same sentiments that he thought Greg Penn was going to have a huge season for LSU at linebacker. So it's an interesting dynamic. Their front seven is pretty doggone good. And I think they've shown a much more approach to try to get off the field on third down. They had troubles with that last year, to be honest, even though the season had highs and lows and a lot of lows early, that they had difficulties at times getting off the field on third down. And so getting a better pass rush and trying to develop some corners has been priority number one for LSU. But I'm telling you, Denver Harris has the tools to be a really, really good player in this league. The guy that's keeping him from being that guy is Denver Harris. He's got to mature a little bit. And listen, we all did dumb things, and maybe we aren't as focused at 19 years old or 20 years old as we are later on. But he's got a chance to be special at corner.
Mike Detillier, WWL Radio TV New Orleans, LSU and Mississippi State this weekend, 11 a.m., Davis Wade Stadium. Mike D joins us on the Farm Bureau Insurance guest line. Mike, Alabama made a lot of mistakes Saturday night. I don't think they're near as far off as some people made it out to be. But give Texas credit. They did what they need to do. I didn't understand what Bama was trying to do with Milroe and not more design runs. But having said that, what was your takeaway from Texas going into Bryant-Denny and taking the win?
They lost the battle up front in the trenches. Their offensive line play is highly erratic. And what I call secondary blocking done by tight ends and running backs wasn't real good. I don't understand the concept of not using Milroe more in the RPO scheme and getting him out on the edge. You're trying to force him to be a pocket quarterback. Okay, that's not what he does well. He's a movement guy. And I'm sort of perplexed that if you want him to be that guy, then he's not the guy to be the starter for you. Okay, if you're going to use an RPO type scheme, then he's the guy. His athletic gifts are through the roof.
Yeah.
And he scares the bejesus out of you as a runner. Now, again, his erraticism as a passer has shown up. On defense, they were not able to get a good pass rush on a consistent basis against Texas. And I've never believed this, and I've told you this throughout the years we've worked together. This stupidity that people repeat because they hear it from coaches who say stupid things too about next man up. Tell me who's the next Will Anderson on that Alabama team. There is. He's not there. The same. I heard it all offseason. Oh, it's always been next man up. Or it might have been, but there's not a Bryce Young on that team. Bryce bailed them out time after time last year at quarterback. Will Anderson, when you needed to play as a pass rusher, he got it for you. And Brian Branch, I thought was the unsung hero for them, just like Mackay is for LSU. Brian was for Alabama in that nickel position where, he was playing nickel corner, he was playing safety, he was the last line of defense. But he was the chirper. He was the interpreter. How many times have you ever seen an Alabama team get hit on for long passes like they did against Texas? They got guys looking at one another like, well, I thought you were supposed to get him. Was it me? That's where Brian Branch, and in the past we saw who did it too. It was Fitzpatrick. He was great with that, getting people in the right spots. He was sort of the coach on the field for Nick Saban on defense. So I agree with you in many ways. They got really talented people there. But there are still some flaws on this team. And the question marks going into the season are still there today. Can you play better up front along the offensive line? What type of consistency will you have at quarterback? I thought the thing that really stuck out for me was on obvious passing situations. You got a lot of whiffs from your running backs and tight ends.
That's a great point.
And protection. I mean, total whiffs. Total whiffs.
Well, Nick doesn't have near the staff that he had for that 8 or 9 year run. And it just is what it is. And,
and everything changes, and sometimes dramatically in college football, okay? And while Alabama is still a good football team, I think overall the SEC is down this year with one exception, and that's Georgia. And they loaded. Now, we didn't know about the quarterback, but I think we're getting to see more and more. But the schedule gives him an opportunity to grow with the team.
You just nailed it. He doesn't have to play a tough game for 8 weeks.
Not until Tennessee. Now, they have become the X factor, okay, because we've seen kind of bits and pieces of Tennessee. But if you can make a pretty strong argument today, can't you, that Tennessee is the second best team in the SEC? Who else would you put in that 2 spot?
Well, if Bama does what they should do, I'm putting Bama there. But I understand what Heupel looks to be operating at another level in that staff, that coaching staff.
Yeah, he hits you with the offensive tsunami.
No doubt.
Okay, that's his deal, and he has always sort of reminded me a lot of Lincoln Riley in his approach to the game of football, in that I'm going to swing and try to knock you out early. And then, then I can do some things defensively, because he doesn't have all the personnel I think he would really want on defense. But if I can kind of knock you around and get you dizzy, then I can do some things defensively to scheme up against you. And Tennessee's hitting you a bunch of different ways, and they jump all over you. And so now you are forced to abandon, to a certain extent, the running game, or get away from it quickly. to throw the football. And they're not going to scheme up against you that way. I think he's got a better staff defensively than Lincoln does. But because as far as Grinch, how he still has a job at USC is amazing to me. After, with all the talent they have in the California area, and your defense plays this bad week in, week out. But Tennessee, I think, is the sleeping giant. And we've said that for years, that they've got pieces there, and I think they got the right coach. I think Josh, with his mentality, his ability to jump on you early, set the pace, and like Lane Kiffin, what is not talked about is he runs the football a lot. There is some physicality to his game on offense and his ability to run the football. So he keeps you on your heels. So you like, a cat underneath a rocker with the tail. Every time you go down, he pulls that tail back, and then, he hits you a lot of different ways, and he catches you. He catches you a lot of ways. So I like what I've seen from Tennessee early on, and to see how well that defense will grow throughout the year will be an interesting development in the SEC, because if anybody can derail Georgia, it would be Tennessee. But, again, Georgia has not finished in the top 2 or 3 in recruiting just by happenstance the last 3 or 4 years.
Right.
I mean, they got, to use that term, they got dudes on that team too now, and we just don't know about, in critical times, can he make a play? Stetson Bennett, I'll give him this, that when you think about the games he was at Georgia, other than the SEC championship game against Alabama, when the moment got hot, he played good.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes quarterbacks kind of melt in that moment. They really do. And Stetson was a guy, hey, bring it on. I'll show you just how good I am.
Yeah, he's a gamer.
And he did. Every time but once. And that was against Alabama in the SEC championship game. Other than that, he played big when the moment was big. And now it's going to be Joe Milton's time to show, can he do that?
Mike, I got 30 seconds. Does Tennessee blow out Florida this weekend?
Yeah, I think they do. Man, Florida's lack of physicality up front. You saw it against Utah. Utah pushed them around. And Utah was playing without 3 starters along the offensive line, without their starting quarterback, and they had 2 starting linebackers that were missing. And they manhandled Florida in that game. So, yeah, I think Tennessee takes care of business against Florida.
We'll leave it there. Mike D., LSU Insider on the Farm Bureau Insurance guest line. Thanks, Mike D.
Thank you, brother.
And a happy birthday week to my man, Mike D., at Mike Detillier on Twitter. The Out of Bounds Show is brought to you by Ag Up Equipment. Ag Up Equipment and agup.com. Find the nearest retail location nearest you at agup.com. And then go find your John Deere tractor to manage your farm, family, land, or hunting camp. agup.com. Ag Up Equipment. John Deere, America's tractor.